Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome inside the Guilty as Charged podcast, coming to you live on a Sunday during the Chargers bye week. My name is Steven, and I am your host. And joining me are my guys, Tyler and Alex. Tyler, we'll start with you, man. How are you doing today?
Doing very well, just reflecting on our quarterback rankings where I did a stats-based ranking before the season, and one Jalen Hurts was in there in the top 10, and I went through all the comments and all the replies, and you know what? I feel okay. I feel like I won during the bye week.
Yeah, that was a good take from you. Me and Alex both kind of argued him as a fringe top 10. So Jalen Hurts balling out, man. Those Eagles are a freight train. Obviously, Jordan Davis's health kind of a key thing to focus in on there. But Alex is here as well, man. Alex, how you doing?
Doing good. Fuck Pittsburgh. Whole city should get fucked. Eagles win. So it was a good day. And Gino, the fighting Genos in Seattle, making me feel not so bad about to knock off the Giants.
Yeah, man. That I went in and watched the most of that game before logging on here today, and outside of Mark Sanchez calling the game, it was a good watch. It was two teams that are obviously exceeding expectations, and two teams that are really doing a lot of cool things schematically. It's fun to watch some good blocking tight ends for a change as well. So it is what it is, but it was a good day in terms of watching football. Obviously, you didn't have a whole lot of stress today. Got to watch the Raiders get completely shut out by the New Orleans Saints, which was a whole lot of fun. They didn't cross midfield on offense until their final drive of the game. So
offensive genius Josh McDaniels.
There we go. Some other good takes from this show in terms of Josh McDaniels. So today's show, obviously, we're going to talk about where the Chargers stand here at the bye week. Of course, the bye week is coming to a close, but we're going to talk about some question marks, some things that the Chargers need to improve upon, kind of take a gander over at the AFC standings and really kind of assess where the Chargers stand in that group. And then, of course, we'll take some questions at the end of the show. So I'm sure we'll have a lot of trade question mark questions at the end of the show. So obviously save those for the end. So first and foremost, I wanted to go over some things that really have kind of stood out to me that are areas that the Chargers need to, and I think can for the most part, improve upon. And for me personally, I want to start with this third down defense that we've seen from the Chargers. Obviously, it was a big concern last year, which I think was a key motivator, and then in the way that they operated this offseason. So, Daniel Popper had a great article about this. And here's what he said in terms of the third down defense. The Chargers have been among the worst teams in the league this season on third downs with 8 or more yards to gain, allowing opposing offenses to convert 37% of the time, which is something, we talked about a little bit after the Seahawks game. But only the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have been worse than the Chargers on 3rd and 8 or longer. And the league average for 3rd and 8 or long in terms of defense is a 23.2% conversion rate. Chargers obviously significantly worse than that. They're also the dead last team in EPA allowed per dropback on 3rd and 8 or long. So Tyler, me and you have kind of talked about this back and forth in terms of like the secondary and the pass rush and things like that. What kind of stands out to you when assessing the way the Chargers are approaching teams on 3rd and long situations?
They're approaching it by not having the right personnel out there. And I don't even mean like they can change who's out there. They don't have the guys. It's not going to change. This is not going to change, barring, some good luck going their way or some more batted passes or something. Asante Samuel Jr. is playing well. We like Derwin James. We like Khalil Mack. I think the interior is mostly playing well, but you can either be the Jaguars and maybe, you're not so great. Like, what am I trying to say? You can do quick passes or scheme something open where you can confuse the Chargers linebackers, or you can just beat the Seahawks, who basically, if you just take care of Khalil Mack, there's no pressure on you. So I'd love to see this third down defense change, but you can either attack these linebackers or just sit there and someone will eventually come open, because the Chargers defense right now is not very schematically sound, not against the run, especially east and west on the outside. I don't know. I don't know what's going to change. I would love to say that there's some sort of change, but there's no additions. You just lost Chris Rumpf, who wasn't doing a whole lot anyway. So unless Jeremiah Tauchu shows up and becomes a world beater on third down, the same problems are going to be there. So I don't even know what to tell you. You can keep blitzing, I suppose, if you want. If you really trust Michael Davis and Asante Samuel Jr., you can keep doing that same blitz sort of scheme you did against Wilson, against the Raiders, against the Chiefs, sort of against the Texans. But otherwise, like, I don't really expect this third down defense to change.
Yeah, I mean, they're playing like a third down defense that doesn't have Joey Bosa, that doesn't have someone who was supposed to be their number one corner in JC Jackson, and won't have him for the rest of the season. So like there's not a whole lot you could do at that point. Derwin James has not really been playing like a top 5 safety, right? If we're just like being honest with ourselves, obviously he's been okay, not been bad this season. But in addition to the fact that, you know, like Tyler said, their defense is just, if you stop Khalil Mack, or if you can hold up Khalil Mack, no one else on that defense is really giving you a lot of problems right now. Aside from maybe Michael Davis 1/2 against Denver. Like, that's really some of the defense, you know, and Drew Tranquil, like, on occasion. But other than that, it's really just been, they don't have a lot of playmakers right now. And when you don't have those guys, it makes everything that Tyler's saying, in addition to the defense not being schematically sound, stand out a whole lot more when you don't have those guys. So, you know, hopefully Joey is back by the end of November. Hopefully, you know, they figure out what to do in the quarterback room and kind of reshuffle things there. But until the Chargers either get some guys back, or, you know, just kind of make the best of what they have, at least get a little bit more pass rush than they have been getting without Bosa, it's kind of just going to be the same third down defense, which is last year's, but, you know, accentuated by not having the playmakers.
Yeah, so there are a few things that both of you guys kind of highlighted, and I do think that there are some personnel tweaks that they can do that can help make a difference. And you know, for me, the biggest concern, frankly, is just the miscommunications that keep on happening, the blown coverages that keep on happening, and you know, that's not something that's purely personnel based. Like, these are issues from Asante Samuel Jr., from Derwin, from obviously Drew Tranquil, who's a good coverage player. So the amount of blown coverages to me is frankly a bigger concern than, hey, we don't have Joey Bosa right now. Obviously, like, in a vacuum, that sounds like a bad take, right? Because Joey solves so many issues, but this is the second year of the defense, and we're still seeing all of these issues in terms of communication and how they pass off and how they match routes and things like that. And that is something that I think can and should improve, because you look at who they have in the secondary, right? You know, Bryce Callahan, Asante Samuel Jr., Derwin, Nas. Like, this is not a group that should be struggling with these kind of issues. I know JC Jackson obviously is injured, and he was not playing well before he was injured. But this is a group that theoretically should not be having these kind of issues. And so some of that, of course, probably stemming from the lack of a pass rush. But in terms of the secondary, I think it's just a matter of guys trying to do too much. I mean, if you look at the touchdown Asante Samuel Jr. Allowed last week, you know, that's poor eyes by him. He was trying to make a play on the ball as opposed to making a play on the man. And I think that is just poor technique. So I don't think, you know, there's a lot of like, Brandon Staley's scheme sucks. Like, the scheme is not very good. I don't know what the reason is, you know, who is necessary to blame, but there's just not a, you know, true like cohesive feeling from the way that the Chargers are matching routes. And I think that, to me, is the biggest issue with this group right now. Because you look at this personnel, and this is not a group of secondary players that should be having these issues. So if the Chargers can kind of buckle down on the lack of communication errors, I think they can improve this. But I mean, you're talking about, I feel like I need to have like the special teams conversation again. Like, just don't be worse, or just don't be the worst in the league. And, you know, the scheme should be something to improve upon. But schematically, it's just a big concern how many times that they are just not communicating properly.
Yeah, it's why you could almost point to saying this defense actually could be good, because you see moments where 100% this team's really good, and against the Seahawks, like, it's you know, it's pretty close, pretty close. But there's always that play in some game. There's always that play, and for whatever reason, you know, Staley talked about when he first was hired, it's not just transmitting a message to your defense. It's not just relaying information. The difference between that and teaching is very significant. And right now, for whatever reason, and Popper pointed out in his article several times so far, the message just isn't translating. I don't know what it is. The scheme, it's not easy like Gus Bradley by any means. It's not that easy, of course. But at this point in year 2, with some very smart and talented players, it shouldn't be this difficult. So, everyone's asking in the chat, what's the issue? It's coaching. For whatever reason, coaching, teaching, all those things, it's just not working right now. And I think some guys on an individual level are improving. I think Jerry Tillery right now has been playing a lot better than he has. I think Morgan Fox is having a career year. I think Austin Johnson looks great. All that sort of stuff. Drew Tranquil looks great. But for whatever reason, when it comes to being 11 players on a scheme, there's just a couple of guys every other play, in particular on third down, who just aren't getting it right now. And I really think that comes down to coaching.
Yeah, and again, like you look at where this scheme is being played. I mean, obviously the Eagles are not necessarily outright doing a Vic Fangio kind of defense, but a lot of the same principles that the Chargers play with are being used in Philadelphia. I mean, you look at the Broncos. I mean, that's literally a guy who was coaching under Brandon Staley with the Rams a couple of years ago, and obviously the Rams are not like where they usually are, but they're still a really good defense. So, just the way that this coaching staff is communicating, like I don't feel like the defense is super well coached outside of like a few plays here or there. So, that's definitely something that needs to be addressed. One thing that I do want to see in terms of personnel packages, we don't see in third and long situations, we don't really see Jerry Tillery and Morgan Fox on the field at the same time a whole lot. That package, if you're talking about Khalil Mack, those two, and then another edge rusher is probably their best pass rushing package at this point. But I always feel like I see one of Austin Johnson and Sebastian Joseph Day on the field at all times. And I understand they're the two best defensive tackles on the team in a vacuum, right? But I would like to see them kind of pivot a little bit more towards their version of a NASCAR package. I mean, obviously you're not going to bring in, kick Calvin Oy inside or something like that, but allow Jerry Tillery and Morgan Fox to really kind of wreak some havoc up the middle. And I think that is an improvement personnel wise that they can use to get more of a pass rush out there on third down.
This is where we're at. More Jerry Tillery.
I know.
But I get what you're saying, though. I do get what you're saying. And I think people are still, unhappy with Jerry Tillery. And I understand why. But there are things he's doing as a pass rusher that are really solid. And I believe, what was it, 1 play or 2 plays against the Seahawks that were negated by penalty? Yeah, I think he had a couple of really good rushes there. So
that's where we're at on defense. More Jerry Tillery, we'll see what happens there. I don't know. Not expecting a whole lot from Jeremiah Tauchi. Would have loved to be aggressive this week, but we'll see what happens there. All right, the next issue that I wanted to highlight here, in my opinion, a lot of people talking about the passing game, and I think rightfully so, right? But I think for me, the rushing offense is, holistically a bigger problem, right? Because eventually you'll get Keenan Allen healthy, you'll get Mike Williams back. So for me, the position that this Chargers rushing attack sits right now is a huge concern for me. So currently the Chargers are 27th in rushing DVOA and 23rd in EPA per rush. Last year, the Chargers were 14th in DVOA on the ground and 15th in EPA per rush. And so the Chargers' inability to run the ball, I think, is really costing them. I highlighted this a couple of weeks ago because of the way that they want to run play action. And it's still a big issue. We've talked a little bit about the tight end perspective and things that can change there. But Alex, how do you think the Chargers go about, if at all, improving the rushing attack on offense?
At this point, pray that you get your original offensive line back. That's for one thing. If you get Rashawn Slater back at some point, other than that, it's just kind of, you can try to sort of patch holes, but really, Trey Pipkins is pretty banged up right now. Obviously, playing with a sprained MCL. Zion Johnson has not been as good as when he started the year. Austin Eckler's rebounded, but now they lost Josh Kelly. Right, so it's sort of just like you plug one hole either on the offensive line or in the run game, and then another one opens up, and that's just how it feels like the Chargers' run game has been all year. I think there are some interesting things they could try that just maybe that could get them more interested, but again, they don't really have the people to do it right now, right? end arounds to DeAndre Carter, like we've just decided that those don't work at this point. So we're not going to do them. Right. So, maybe you could have gotten Mike Williams involved in a couple, handoffs or sweeps here or there. You could have just tried to do some of that stuff. But obviously, Mike Williams is now out for a month. So if you wanted to mix things up and make the rushing offense a little less traditional, you could have tried to do that, but now you can't. So I think the Chargers rushing offense at this point sort of is what it is, and it's amplified by the fact that the Chargers don't have a passing offense either, right? I mean, the fact that you don't have Keenan Allen 100%, the fact that you're not going to have Mike Williams for the next month, and DeAndre Carter and Michael Bandy are, your wide receiver 2 and 3 at this point. So that's the position the Chargers are in. This is why people are badgering them to trade for a wide receiver or do something there as well. But at this point, like it all just kind of blends in together on the offense. The rushing offense not being good stems from the passing attack not being good, which, stems from all these other injuries as well. Stems from, Herbert not being as sharp as he was last year. And I think at some point it just kind of all goes together. And until one of those things improved and Herbert starts just having some of those generational performances he did last year, or the Chargers start getting wide receivers back, or, they just try to be a little bit more creative in their rushing attack, it's all kind of going to suffer for the worse that the Chargers don't have really any of those pieces put together.
Yeah, I think this rushing attack is so close, and we saw for just a brief moment in time against the Browns. But this offense that comes from the Saints and Joe Lombardi, blah blah blah, they want to have a 2-back system and they want to use 2 tight ends. They want to use several tight ends. You do not have a good second blocking tight end, and you currently don't have a real viable RB2 right now, based on the way Michelle is playing. I think both guys could potentially turn it around after the bye, or I should say Trey McKitty could turn it around after the bye, absolutely. But those things are suffering. They're just, and those 2 guys are just not playing all that well. You don't have Kelly, you don't have Parham, so things are going to continue to struggle. I know people are frustrated in the chat about Lombardi's play calls and the scheme. I think the scheme's fine. I can point to several plays against the Seahawks where Jamari Sawyer, I didn't expect this, looked so good in space. Everyone's blocking. All 5 linemen are blocking, no problem. But Trey McKitty gets walked 4 yards in the backfield, and Austin Eckler has to stop his feet, and he can't get anything going. Another play where Sony Michel is supposed to run, could be, everyone on the right side blocking, no problem. But Trey McKitty gets blocked, 4 yards into the backfield, and poor Sony Michel has to kind of like adjust, and you see him hesitate and do the wrong thing. But I think that stemmed from McKitty, not getting it going. So if you don't have a back, a second back, I should say, who can't really create more than what is given to him, and you don't have another good blocking tight end, you're kind of stuck. But I do think the scheme itself it'll work if you have the right guys. I think right now they're just suffering because they don't have those guys right now. They need to get Kelly back or another RB2. Maybe Spiller steps up, I don't know. And they either need Parham back or they need McKitty to just revert kind of back to his good 2021 self, where he was, man by himself blocking Cam Hayward at the goal line and pushing dudes around against Pittsburgh.
Yeah,
they got to get back to that. So I do think there's a chance that they get better. I feel like they can with just a couple guys returning very, very soon. And Keenan Allen does help a lot as well. That is one of the best run blocking wide receivers in the league. He's by far the best run blocking wide receiver on the team. That's going to help a ton too.
Yeah, I think Josh Palmer is probably second on that list for the team. So they definitely have a slot blocking problem as well as a tight end blocking problem, which you talked about. I know people are rightfully frustrated with Joe Lombardi, but I think the way that they have pivoted their rushing scheme is really fun to watch. They're just not executing it as well as they should be, in part because of personnel. But the scheme is sound in my opinion. They're doing a lot of cool things in terms of their counter game. They're doing a lot of split zone, a lot of inside zone. So they've really pivoted from an outside zone heavy team that they were last year to doing some really smart things on the ground. It's just like Tyler is saying, you don't have a legitimately good blocking tight end. You don't have a legitimately good blocking slot receiver. And if you really watch, like that's where the Chargers have had their biggest issues on the ground is being able to set the backside edge and handle the point of attack on the opposite edge. So that's a big problem. So I'm looking forward to really seeing how they handle things once Donald Parham and Keenan Allen, kind of get back into the groove. But this rushing attack, to me, like it's never going to get going unless Joe Lombardi really like places an emphasis on it. And I think, this is kind of really showing up in the red zone for me because, you're looking at an offense that has taken a 10% decrease in terms of touchdowns per drive. And a lot of that really kind of stems from, in my opinion, getting into the red zone and not running the ball enough. Like, I know people want to see Justin Herbert air it out and all that, but I look at this team get into the red zone and they're doing way too much in terms of the passing game to try and get Justin Herbert and the receivers going. When, in my opinion, the best red zone offense that they have right now is the rushing attack with Austin Eckler. I mean, we saw it a little bit early against the Seahawks when they were still kind of in the game. So, for me, like, this is just a Lombardi needs to really emphasize the run game and keep the game script positive. And so that's an easy fix, right? Like, Joe Lombardi just being able to focus on the run game should theoretically improve this rushing attack and allow them to get, more high leverage opportunities, in my opinion.
Yeah, thankfully, when was the last time we saw Keenan Allen do that? I'm going to be between 3 defenders and Justin Herbert's going to rifle it in for a perfect touchdown. We haven't been able to see that this entire year. And I think like Keenan Allen existing in this offense is going to change the red zone offense so much. When you're condensed like that, I'm honestly surprised they didn't go to as many Mike Williams fades as they did in previous years. I mean, I get that that's not like a good play, but also if you only have Mike Williams, that's kind of his play. But now you do have someone like Keenan Allen who can do so much. And then at the end of the Seahawks game, Austin Eckler is running a whip route at the goal line like he's Hunter Renfrow or something. I had no idea he had that in him. I have not seen that from him in years, in any of his years, I should say. So, yeah, go with the run game, go with Austin Eckler, go with Keenan Allen, and eventually you'll get Donald Parham. They tried to set up, I believe it was against the Seahawks, that screen to Everett. I think he got like 5 or so. They're trying to get in the red zone, get that going. That's also Donald Parham's play, so they get him going as well. And then at some point, try to get back to Xander Horvath. I think that, I don't know. I just feel like you said, what they're doing right now was a bit too complicated to try to do something else. And I feel like there's just specific guys that should be featured more. And one of them is Keenan Allen, and he'll be back.
Yeah, and if they're going to want to continue with the 2 tight end stuff, I do want to see more Xander Horvath and allow him to get some more opportunities as a blocker as well. So, Alex, anything else that you wanted to mention here in terms of schematics or personnel that you think the Chargers need to improve upon coming out of the bye week?
Not really. I mean, we've kind of said everything in terms of improving the scheme. Like, it's really just getting guys healthy and trying to make stuff work, because right now they're sort of playing with a bare bones roster. If you said by week 7 or whatever, we're in week 8 next week when they come off the bye, that we would be down JC Jackson and Joey Bosa and all of these players on offense and defense. It's kind of a miracle they're 4-3. And if you look at point differential and all these other metrics as well, they're sort of fortunate to be in that position. So at this point, I think it's less scheme related, because there is a bit of a nature to the Chargers right now where it is kind of reshuffling deck chairs on the Titanic when it comes to like, okay, what can they really do better? It's like, okay, well, a little bit more Xander Horvath. Here we go. Like, is that going to be the change to the offense? Not to get too doomer here, but at some point, I do think that it just does come down to getting guys healthy and making sure that, obviously a big part of this team is getting Justin Herbert back to 100% in what he is last year. Because if Justin Herbert, continues playing like he has been the last couple of weeks, this is not a playoff team. If Justin Herbert plays like 2021 Justin Herbert, this is a playoff team, right? And I think that is the distinction and will determine how far the Chargers go this season as well.
Yeah, I mean, he would never admit it, right? But I think the rib injury is getting better, but I still think that it absolutely is impacting him. And obviously after the bye week is allowing him to kind of rest up and get even healthier.
No, absolutely. It's hard to tell because it's not like we had this rib injury and he has all of his receivers. So it's like, okay, we can clearly isolate what the issue is here. He both has an injury and a sort of banged up offensive line, and he doesn't have his receivers. So it's really hard to tell. With that said, watching him, you can tell like there's just something that's a little bit off. I don't really know what it is yet. I'll need to see more games, but he just won't pull that trigger. He can't quite make that tight window throw. He can't take off and run. So yeah, it's he's definitely struggling more than he'll let on. He'll be as good as he will be after the bye, but we still need to remember that this is not 100%.
Yeah, I mean, we've just seen differences in his play. Like Tyler said, he's just kind of not throwing that ball in where he should, or like going after that window as aggressively. The batted down balls problem. I mean, how many did we count against Seattle and in the last few weeks in general? And then, of course, against Seattle, there was just the, really egregious error where there were two defenders blanketing DeAndre Carter, and he just decided to throw the ball there anyway, right? So something definitely is off with Justin Herbert. And, the Chargers, especially in this situation right now where they are down all these players, really only go as far as Justin Herbert will take them, especially until Joey Bosa and some of these key contributors do come back.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's definitely not a coincidence that the best the offense looked in against the Seahawks was when Keenan Allen was like really making an impact. So hopefully that changes there. Tyler, anything else that you want to mention in terms of improvements or key things to focus on after the bye week?
Yeah, I could go with a couple of things. Let me look at my good old list here. Addressing the hidden yards here. And I think if we want the offense to be good, the offense is like, I think it was like 15th in yards per drive or 12th or whatever. It's like average, but boy, they could really use some help in both kickoff returns and in penalties because we're asking this offense with an banged up offensive line and a hurt quarterback and no receivers to go 85 yards a game or per drive, I should say.
Yeah,
is what it feels like because you have DeAndre Carter, who's like, not only is he averaging 19.3 yards per attempt, it literally looks like that. There's not even like a budge around that. Like he just hovers right around that mean for some reason. So, if you're starting Justin Herbert at 6 yards, per drive back on average, then a touchback, and then your offense, whether by false start or holding, which I believe before this week, and it'll probably go down because they didn't play, but they were bottom 5 in holding penalties and false start penalties on offense. Like you're asking the offense that's already banged up, not that talented at the receiving core with some guys out, to do a lot. And so you really need to address those hidden yards, get a little bit better blocking on special teams, or on kickoff return, I should say, get DeAndre Carter to get 3 more yards, and then don't set the offense back with penalties. And not that they, have a kickoff, they go to the 19 and immediately there's a holding penalty. It doesn't work like that, not always, but you can't start from the 19 and then get a 10-yard penalty and say, okay, now with no talent at wide receiver, go drive 85 yards for a touchdown. Like you have to be better in that category. And so just a little bit more there, a little bit less, shooting yourself in the foot. I think you could be better.
Yeah, Alex Caston from Chargers Wire had a great breakdown on special teams earlier this week on his Twitter page. You can go check that out. It was fantastic. And there's definitely a blocking issue still on kickoff return. And DeAndre Carter has not been perfect by any means, but there's been a few times where he's had a lane and it's like, Chris Rumph will miss a block here, or like Joshua Kelly will miss a block there, or Xander Horvath will miss a block there. So I would think that, the Chargers special teams they're top 10 in DVA right now, as everybody predicted it would be. Ryan Fick is doing a fantastic job with that unit. And I think we will see some adjustments on kickoff return, whether that's making a change to Michael Bandy or whether that's making a change to Joe Reed remains to be seen. But I think Ryan Ficken is probably the best coordinator on this team right now. So I'm going to trust Ficken to figure a way out to, fix the kickoff return unit, because frankly, that's the only thing keeping the Chargers back from having a top 5 special teams DVOA unit. So, he's doing a great job, and I'm excited to see what happens there with the kickoff return unit. But I do think they probably should make a change, because DeAndre Carter is frankly being asked to do way too much right now. And I think making that change to Bandy or to Joe Reed is just a really simple ask to keep a guy fresh.
Yeah, might as well. Joe Reed was sort of your kick returner too. If Palmer is out and if all these guys are out, Joe Reed might be active. So might as well. Or let Hightower do it, or anybody else give it a shot. But it really couldn't be all that worse than 19 yards per return.
Yeah. And at this point, like the Chargers at one point when Nasir Adderley was returning, kickoffs and punts, were like, all right, well, we shouldn't probably do that anymore because, he's going to be one of our starting safeties. And now DeAndre Carter is going to be a wide receiver too. And it's like, oh, okay, well, he can still take kickoffs, right? We wouldn't have Mike Williams or Keenan Allen in the positions that they're in, still doing kickoff returns and, putting themselves in dangerous positions, right? Anyway, so DeAndre Carter really right now is the second best receiver on the team. you probably should go in a different direction and try Joe Reed, like Tyler said, or go through some other route when it comes to kick returnings, or maybe you find someone that just gives you a different spark anyway in this time where DeAndre Carter is playing this bigger role in the receiver room.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, I think getting less of Carter on offense and allowing him to focus more on special teams, I think would be beneficial. Or, if you're going to have him be a starter, have him do a little less on special teams. Tyler, did you have another one you want to point out?
Not really. Outside of just being a better first quarter team, the Chargers are, I think, second worst in points per game allowed as a defense, and then 26th in points scored. I don't know how much of that has to do with time of possession or whatever, but the defense is not doing anyone any favors. The offense isn't doing anyone any favors, and they're one of the worst first quarter teams in the league.
Yeah, you want to talk about stealing points. I mean, you look at the best teams are so good at like ending the first half with a score and then starting in the second half with another score. And I feel like we just never see the Chargers actually go out and do that. So it's funny how that works, because in the first 3 games, it was like great first quarter team, terrible third quarter team, and now it's like bad at both. So that's fun.
Yeah, and I mean, going to time of possession, I'm pretty sure Seattle was one of their worst performances of the year in that regard, where they just had a lot of 3-and-out drives.
Yeah.
Just checking the numbers now, but they had 26 minutes and 31 seconds of possession against Seattle. For the year, they averaged 30, which is good for 16th in the league. So they're very middle of the league in terms of staying on the field. But obviously, as the injuries have piled up and as they just haven't been as efficient on offense and haven't been staying on the field for as long for these, sustained drives, then obviously that time of possession number has come down a little bit from kind of where it was maybe those first couple of weeks of the season as well. So yeah, I mean, I definitely would like that goes back to the run game, which we were talking about earlier, and just being able to stay on the field for longer portions of time, which would also improve defensive performance, right? Because I think you saw the defense struggle and get gassed versus Seattle for that very reason.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great call. And for me, that's a bigger reason why they need to really focus in on the run game and allow their defense to kind of stay off the field. So, all right, we'll kind of take a stock here of the AFC. Obviously, the Chargers on a bye week, getting potentially some help in terms of the standings this week. So if you guys have some questions, we'll get to those in about 10 minutes. So I've seen some already kind of strolling through. So if you want to kind of sort this as like a tiers conversation, I think we can kind of start from there. And I think for me, we can safely say that the Bills and the Chiefs are in the tier of their own. And then that second tier is kind of really getting some clarity as well. I mean, Titans getting a win again, and I think getting a win again today in Houston. Ravens are 5-3. The Dolphins won in Detroit today. They're 5-3. The Jets lost. So to me, they're kind of out of that conversation. So for me, there's like pretty clearly like a tier 1, a tier 2, and a tier 3. And I think the Chargers are in that tier 3 right now, holding the 7 seed. We'll see what happens with the rest of the other teams. But obviously the key question mark here is if the Chargers can kind of do enough to make the playoffs. So Tyler, where do you see the Chargers fitting into the AFC right now?
Yeah, let me just really quickly pull up the playoff standings because I need to keep that all in my head. So Buffalo, Tennessee at 2, of course. I knew Arjun was wrong. Arjun told me that I shouldn't have bet on Tennessee, but I swear to God, that team always figures it out somehow.
Really?
As far as the sorting goes and where the Chargers should be, so I have them at 5-5 the rest of the way. And it basically comes down to, is this a team the Chargers can beat? Is this a team the Chargers should not beat? Typically, it comes down to coaching or just health. Some games like Kansas City, San Francisco, that's a loss. Games like Atlanta or the Colts, that's a win. And it feels very cut and dry to me at this point until they're healthy, or at least till they get a bit more healthy. Then you have kind of a wild card team or game against the Rams that really could determine, where they go. Are the Rams down by that point? Are the Chargers any better? We'll see. They are definitely not a tier 1 team. They are definitely not a tier 2 team right now. You could say that now, if the Chargers were fully healthy, with the guys that are expected to come back and they go into the postseason, could they beat Kansas City, Baltimore, Tennessee? Sure. Could they beat the Bills? Probably not. But everybody else, I think the Chargers could beat them. But as far as where they're at right now, they're a tier 3 team that is a couple injuries away from being, completely out of contention. The fact that they are 7th is kind of amazing. With that said, everyone here, with the exception of Cincinnati, they're not really all that great either. They're all kind of like you could cluster a lot of these guys in a tier 3 sort of category. So I think just because the AFC is so weak this year, I think they could still make it, but we'll see how that health holds and how they do against, the Falcons after the bye.
Right. I mean, really, the AFC is, if we're trying to make tiers, Buffalo and Kansas City, I think are pretty clearly your tier 1. You can put Tennessee and Baltimore probably in your tier 2. And then it's a whole lot of mid. At this point, aside from maybe the Dolphins, obviously Tua has, not been healthy for, a couple games this year. And they've experienced losses because of that. But I don't know, the Jets are the 5th seed right now, and Zach Wilson is garbage. I'm officially ready to call that one because that was a rough game today. And like Tyler said, Cincinnati, Jamar Chase is out a month. So that team is probably going to experience a little bit of a hit in terms of their standings, have a tough game in Cleveland tomorrow night. Talking about Cleveland, even a team that's 2-5 right now and supposedly on bottom, they are going to get Deshaun Watson back at some point here. So, I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of made a run on that basis as well. But yeah, really, to me, the AFC is really 3-4 teams deep, and everybody else is kind of like a fight for those 3 spots, like Tyler was saying. So I think the Chargers can get one of those spots and be a wild card team, and then you hope at some point they're healthy enough to maybe pull an upset over Kansas City or over Tennessee, over a Baltimore in that first round. But at this point, it really the schedule I think is pretty challenging too, in terms of at least their next few games here. And Tyler said he looks at a game like Atlanta like it's a win, and I'm like, can we? Are we supposed to do that? That's going to the East Coast game at 1:00 after what Atlanta did today, which is put up 34 points. I don't know. Their rushing offense probably could really give the Chargers a lot of problems next week. And then their next 2 games after that are San Francisco and Kansas City. And should the Chargers be favored in any of those 3 upcoming games? I don't think so at this point. And if you're staring 4-6, or let's say 5-5, down in the middle of the face here in a couple weeks, that could be really tough. But I don't know. I think the Chargers are a playoff team based on what the format of the playoffs is. They allow half the teams in the conference in now. So by that metric, the Chargers can be a playoff team. And, if Herbert puts it together and gets healthy, they can take on anyone in the playoffs, right? If we get that 2021 version of Justin Herbert. But right now, with the Chargers not getting that and the Chargers being injured, in addition to all these other factors, I think the Chargers are technically a playoff team, and they're the 7th seed as demonstrated here. But I don't know. I don't know how long I expect them to hold on to that playoff spot, and then what they would even do with that spot if they got there, if we're just judging off of the same Chargers team that we're watching right now.
Yeah, no, I think that's really fair. I think the Chargers should be favored at Atlanta. I know the Falcons are technically first place in the NFC South, but they're not really like a playoff team. I think they're doing some really cool things on the ground. Absolutely. They finally figured out that Kyle Pitts is good again today. So that was, good for my fantasy squad, I guess. But from a DVOA perspective, Football Outsiders has the Chargers as the 4th easiest schedule remaining on the season. And obviously they have some very difficult games, at San Francisco, home against the Chiefs. Those are definitely difficult games, but their next 6, you get the Falcons and then the Niners, Chiefs, and then you have Cardinals, Raiders, Dolphins. If you come out of that next 6-week stretch 4-2, you're talking about an 8-7 team at that point, with 3 games to go. So I think the Chargers could certainly make a run here, relative to the phrase, right? I think an optimistic take is that they get to the playoffs, maybe make it a little frisky. Maybe they win a playoff game. but anyone expecting more than I think is going to be disappointed. But I mean, you look at the AFC, I think we can safely say that, the top 4 seeds right now are playoff teams. And I think Miami probably has that 5th spot, but I don't expect the Jets to be there at the end with the way that Zach Wilson is playing. We'll see what happens with the Bengals. I mean, losing Jamar Chase is going to be huge for them. I don't expect the Patriots to figure it out. The Colts are lousy. So, I mean, really, you're talking about the Chargers being one of 3 teams, maybe 4, to fight for the last 2 playoff spots. And I think they can do that. But like you guys are saying, like, a lot has to go their way. And maybe this is the year that they get some lucky bounces go their way. I mean, it's certainly been the case so far against the Browns and against the Broncos as well. So you never know, I guess.
Yeah, definitely never know. We'll see what Cincinnati looks like without Jamar Chase ripping it off for 60 yards off a screen.
Yeah.
The only one that really sucks for me is looking at Denver too. Like that one, do I want to see the Chargers go? Like the Chargers just beat Denver and kind of off of not a fluke because it was legal, but kind of a fluke. Do I think they can go to at Denver and win that one? I don't know yet. But I think they're going to go 1-2 the next 3 games. Again, I just don't believe Atlanta's going to pull it off against the Chargers. If they do, everyone can pack their bags and go home because that season would certainly be over. But just survive, go 1-2, and then from there, hopefully, guys get back, and then we can kind of see what the team is really going to look like. But they also got to stay healthy the rest of the way. So I don't know. I'm fringe, barely optimistic they'll make the postseason, and only because their schedule is 50-50 and the AFC is not great.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the fringe too, but they just need, honestly, like 9-8, just like last year, kind of probably gets them into the playoffs. So we'll see what happens. So if you guys want to drop in the chat, if you think the team is still going to make a playoff team, feel free and do that. Otherwise, we'll get to some questions here. First and foremost, shouting out Tyler's mom with the big super sticker, as always. Appreciate the support there. So yeah, if you've been dying to ask us a question about where things stand with this team, about trade deadline stuff, feel free to let us know. Super chats, always appreciated for sure. Oops.
I think we're mostly out of trade questions. I think people have given up on the idea of there ever being anything.
I appreciate the optimism from Jarrett Holeby. He still says Super Bowl. That would be quite a shock at this point.
Yeah. It's one of those improbable run things, right? If they make it to the postseason, then they just, for whatever reason, Herbert decides to have a god tier game and everyone's healthy. Like, I do think there's a scenario where they can do damage, but Super Bowl, asking this team to do that 3 times, and then of course 4th for the Super Bowl.
I can't see this team like beating the Bills. Like there's no.
Bills,
and like
no.
if you're talking about a Super Bowl, like one of those 3 games you have to win probably is against the Bills. As close as this team has played the Chiefs to, at points as well. I don't see them beating the Chiefs right now. I don't see them beating the Ravens. So if you're talking about those top 3 teams in the AFC, if in a 3-game series, if you want to put it that way, you would see the Chargers, or pick them to lose each one. I don't know. Like, it's hard to pick them to win the AFC. Of course, you could get momentum and crazier things have happened, like the Giants team of, 2012 and, all those years that they got in the playoffs and did some damage with Eli Manning. But at this point, it would be rather improbable with, how good the top teams in the AFC are.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a thing I get all the time on Twitter these days from Marquise. Is it better for us to miss the playoffs long term so that we fire this lackluster staff? I mean, listen, like there are certainly people who are rooting for losses at this point. I'm not one of them. Like I think this core needs to start figuring out how to win games. Like, that's the bottom line for me. We haven't seen Justin Herbert in the playoffs yet. Keenan Allen hasn't been in the playoffs for a really long time. So I'm of the business that you root for wins and then you can figure out coaching staffs like down the road. So, it's not out of the question that you make a coordinator change after making the playoffs. Like, I think we've seen teams do that, at least smart teams be proactive. I mean, the Ravens have kind of been the class there of terms of making proactive coaching decisions. So to me, like, I think you want this team to win. Like, you want this team to get into the playoffs and allow Justin Herbert to get some playoff experience and be able to make a run at some point. So if the Chargers miss the playoffs again, you're talking about 3 years, no playoffs in any of the single seasons that Justin Herbert has had. He needs to experience how to win. Like, I understand that wins are not a quarterback stat, absolutely. But this core needs to get into the playoffs, and like that's really how we're going to see them grow and take that next step to being contenders. So I'm of the business that you want to root for more wins and you want to see this team make the playoffs.
I'm also of the mindset that if the Chargers are 9-8 and they make the playoffs versus their 10-7, or sorry, let me say that 9-8 and miss the playoffs versus 10-7 and make the playoffs. I don't know if that determines this staff, or if they get another year at this point.
Sure.
We talked about the Sean Payton stuff before, or other, people that could envy this job. But I don't necessarily think that making the playoffs makes a difference. I mean, different scenario, but we just saw what the Raiders just did with Rich Bisaccia, who took the team to the playoffs. And then they said, oh, we want Josh McDaniels. And that's been going out really good for them so far. I don't know. I think at this point, Staley's staff is probably safe if they make the playoffs, but I don't know. I don't think it's a guarantee that if they make the playoffs and they got blown out by Buffalo or something like that, all of them would just keep their jobs, especially in this current state. So I don't know. I don't really think it's better or worse.
Yeah, I don't think the staff, if they miss the postseason, I think someone gets fired, because I think someone will have to. I think I don't even know if it'll be Lombardi. I do think it'll be someone like Ronaldo Hill.
We got to throw Tom Arth under the rug.
Yeah. Hey, man.
This team fucked up.
They might. But I'm in favor of them going for it and trying to do their best, because I want to know. That's part of the reason I wanted to see them make a move at the deadline instead of teetering off and fading away. How close really are you? Even though a lot of guys are hurt, how close could you really get? And what will it take to make that next jump? But if you're making the exact same, you don't make the postseason, that same exit that you did last year, then I don't really know if you can evaluate how close you really, really are. So, I mean, for what it's worth, the Chargers also did go 4-0, different situations, but to end the season, and then Lynn was still fired. So if it looks awful, let's say the defense is absolutely terrible, maybe, but they win because of offense, maybe Staley gets fired. But I just don't think they're firing anyone outside of a scapegoat fire. But I do want to see them push. I just want to try to have some sort of winning mentality, try to make the postseason. Let's say you've all these injuries, you make the postseason and you make it to the wild card game. At least you kind of know, where you're at, and hell, maybe you win. They weren't supposed to beat the Ravens. They weren't supposed to beat the Bengals, but those are the two most recent Chargers wins in the postseason. So just push for it, see how close you can get, and then evaluate what you need for your team moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, obviously different situations, but the way that I feel about this Chargers team right now is the way that you could maybe look at last year's Eagles team, where there was all this conversation, right, about is Jalen Hurts a franchise quarterback? Is Nick Sirianni a legitimately good head coach? What really is this team? They had some poor showings against the Cowboys after getting blown out and things like that, and they made some really high quality adjustments. They made a push. They made the playoffs, and obviously it wasn't pretty in Tampa Bay, but that momentum of making the playoffs as a young team allowed them to go out and be aggressive and go out and realize hey, we're a couple pieces away from making a Super Bowl push, and now they're the best team in the NFC. And, I think that's obviously not where the Chargers wanted to be at this point in the season, but I think you want them to make a playoff push, and anybody rooting for losses, we did that in 2020 and in 2019, where it was lose out, tank out, let's get draft picks. And it's that's not any fun. That's not where you want this team to be. So I don't think making the playoffs would preclude them from making changes amid the coaching staff unless they like make a playoff, like a legitimate run, win a couple of games in the playoffs. Like that to me is like the only way that this staff remains fully intact next year. Richard Mazara, I think that's how you say it. I apologize, Richard, if it's not. He says, I need to see something this week against the Falcons. They had a bye week. If they come out slow and sluggish, obviously you can kind of fill in the blank there, but the bye week track record is not great for Brandon Staley after he had a bye week and then came out against the New England Patriots, and they were slow and sluggish last year. So, this is a week absolutely where coaches, kind of make their money. I mean, how often do we see the best coaches in the business come out of a bye week and they have a great game plan and they just kind of take it to that next team? So I think the Chargers last year did a lot of smart things in the second half of the season, schematically, and it didn't pay off in that first week out of the bye week. But this is borderline like must-win territory for the Chargers, and we'll get into all of that throughout the rest of the week. But I think Richard is right. Like, you have to see this team show up, start hot, finish strong against a team that, frankly, is probably one of the bottom 5 rosters in the league right now. So this is a game that the Chargers should absolutely win, and frankly need to come out firing on all cylinders this week.
Yeah, I mean, I know Herbert was hurt, but the defense had 14 days or whatever it was to prepare for the Jaguars, and that didn't look so hot for the defense. So yeah, but yes, after the bye, absolutely. I do think the offense, like, you just have Keenan Allen back. Hello, you can run your offense a whole hell of a lot better with Keenan Allen out there, even with Mike Williams out. So I think we will see more from the offense. I do think the run game it'll be better than it has the last 2 weeks. Like, the offense won't be as, God, knock on wood, all this. It won't be as bad as it's been the last 2 weeks. I don't think that's even possible against this Falcons team, but we'll see. Casey Hayward is not healthy for the revenge game, so I think they'll be okay. It's really the defense I need to see, because they can't give up 2 scores to start the first quarter again against the Falcons and Marcus Mariota, who attempts 18 passes a game.
So obviously a lot of conversations about Tom Telesco in the chat. I believe that his contract is up after the season, if I'm not mistaken.
Bye-bye. I think it's pretty clearly Brandon Staley's team, at least on defense. Offense, I don't know, but they've certainly drafted offensive linemen differently. I think there are some, you can definitely point to some Telesco patterns throughout. But it's pretty clearly Brandon Staley's team, unless you think that Tom Telesco wanted Sebastian Joseph Day, Morgan Fox, Kyle Van Noy, Bryce Callahan, wanted to start and feature Chris Harris Jr., Eric Banks, Gerald Everett, Evang Basie, Trey Marshall. So unless you thought that, Telesco really wanted all these former Staley guys, it's pretty
Jeremiah Tauchu.
Jeremiah Tauchu. Well,
yeah, big Staley guy, Jeremiah Tauchu.
He was with Staley for 2 years, man.
I mean, I think he's probably more of a Telesco guy at this point, from that draft. And bringing back all the old Chargers, but yeah.
I mean, that to me is why last week I said, like, if they're gonna make a move with a trade deadline, I think it comes down to Brandon Staley going out and being aggressive. But I think it's pretty clear that they believe that they can just have a next man up mentality, and we've seen that across the board. And it just obviously has not panned out. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see about Tom Telesco, man, because if they don't make the playoffs, like, you can't talk yourself into renewing his contract. Like, you just can't.
No, you can't. I know there's some rumblings about some guys leaving the Chargers department as well. So I don't know. We'll see what they do. Who that would be, who the next GM would be, I don't know. I'm willing to bet it comes from the Broncos or the Rams, not current Broncos and Rams, but the guys from that regime.
Staley's gonna want, again, they've kind of empowered Staley to have a big say here. So, the smart thing, if you're moving on from Tom Telesco, is to get somebody that Brandon Staley is familiar with. But again, I understand, like, the roster is super injured right now, but I mean, everybody in this chat and then the three of us all said that this was like a top 5 roster heading into the season. So, there are certainly quirks about Tom Telesco, but Brandon Staley is very involved in the roster construction at this point.
You can make us GM. That'd be fun. I would absolutely run this team into the absolute freaking dirt. But by golly, we would have had Bo Melton on this team.
Oh my God. I would grab like 5 Anthony Schwartzes in the draft and just line them up and we just go routes all the time. It would be awesome.
I know for a fact that if the three of us were in charge, we would not be having this wide receiver dilemma because we would have drafted a receiver every single year for like the last 5 years. So,
yeah, we'd suck, but by golly, we'd draft receivers.
We would have to.
It would be the most fun 5-11 team or 5-12 team of all time.
We would absolutely have to retain Ed McGuire because I don't know shit about the contract and cap and stuff like that. So
that's what Arjun's for.
That's what Arjun's for. There we go. Screw Ed McGuire. We got Arjun. We're good.
Our cap expertise is messaging Arjun in the Twitter DMs, just like, hey, Arjun, what do you fucking think about this shit?
Oh man. All right. So I am not really seeing any other questions. So if you guys have any, we'll take a couple more questions here for like 3 minutes. So fire away.
We also, big thing here, we would have kept Kaiser White.
Yes, we would have.
Yes, and we literally could have made that work with Arjun. If you know. If that were actually the case, we 100% could have made that work.
Yeah, and Adrian Phillips would still be on the team, absolutely, for sure. Khalil Herbert,
Justin Jackson, and Bobby Holly.
Justin Jackson.
See, but that's the thing.
Bobby Holly.
I would also be playing favorites and having all my favorites on the team. It would be like $200 million deal for Bobby Holly and Fehoko, whatever.
Oh my God! If we had Austin Eckler and Khalil Herbert right now,
But hey, man, Isaiah Spiller, Larry Roundtree, it's great.
Ew.
All right. Well, I guess we're not talking about Kanye West. No, we're not doing that. We're not going down that rabbit hole. All right. Last thing here. We got 2 minutes here before we have to head out. So trade deadline obviously happening on Tuesday. Lots of conversation about Elijah Moore at this point. Tyler already saying no. We have, reportedly there's some other people on Twitter talking about a trade for a safety. I don't know if that ends up happening, but Alex, final thoughts on the trade deadline before we head out for the day.
Nothing's gonna happen. Like it or not, we're stuck with this current team, and whoever comes back from injury and whoever's elevated from the practice squad, probably till the end of the year. So I don't foresee much happening at the trade deadline. The Chargers have never really been proactive at the trade deadline, and I wouldn't expect that to start now. So, yeah, don't get your hopes up for anything, and then on Tuesday, everyone's going to be angry that they didn't make a move at the trade deadline. Maybe rightfully so, but if you were expecting something, I don't know what you've been watching the last couple of years.
Tyler, final thoughts there.
YOLO balls to Michael Bandy and Jason Moore are really cool. I can't wait to see it. No, but I mean, I still have a tiny bit of optimism and hope. They are 4-3. Don't talk to me about the numbers that are bad. Don't talk to me about anything else. I'm going to hold out hope for it's a week-to-week basis, though. I'm week to week.
You're week to week, just like everybody else on the Chargers roster. I feel that. Yeah. I will say I don't expect any trades to happen. I think we could see this team be active on like the veterans who get cut market, as we've seen with obviously Andre Robertson, Dustin Hopkins last year, as well as Sony Michel to start the season. So that's kind of where I think they'll take some of their adventures, if you will. But I mean, Nelson Aguilar to me makes a lot of sense. He's likely going to get traded. He would fix their speed issue. Marquez Callaway, same kind of thing. Although both of those teams won today. I think the results of today kind of hurt the chances that the Chargers do end up making a trade. So we'll see what happens. I do think they could be active, like I said, on the veteran cut market, which they've done that before over the last couple of seasons. All right, so that's going to do it for us today. Appreciate everybody tuning in. We'll be back on our normal schedule this week as the Chargers prepare to take on the Atlanta Falcons. Should be a fun must-win game, I guess, if you want to frame it that way. So excited to see how this team responds, right? I think, like I said, good teams come out of the bye week with a good showing, and we'll see really what happens to the Chargers this week. So appreciate everybody showing up today. Appreciate the comments and the super chats. And if you are listening to this, please leave a rating or review. We always appreciate that. And we'll see you guys next week.